Ice cream. Yeah, you heard me right. Today, we talk about the one thing everyone loves or loved at some point before lactose intolerance sets in. So yeah, only one question to tackle at this point. Vanilla or chocolate? Which flavor would you like? See, within seconds, we have gone from ice cream to starting a fight between which is the true king of this delicious treat. Which reminds me, it's a lot like solid state and tube amplifiers. Both play the music that we love, but which topology is the way to go and why? And with a warm welcome back to New Record Day, what if I told you that you don't have to decide and you get to enjoy the best of both? Welcome back to New Record Day. My name is Ron. If you consider yourself an audiophile or a music enthusiast, welcome home. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you know when the next video drops. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Spatial Audio Raven as well as the Blackbirds. And this serves as your official ethics statement. Spatial Audio sent these amplifiers to me to review, and all of my thoughts and opinions are my own. There has been no financial compensation, and no, I don't get to keep this gear in exchange for the review. And with that, let's jump in and have some fun. The Raven is a fully balanced zero feedback tube preamplifier that features a dual mono design and a 64-step volume attenuator and a remote control. It uses a tube complement of two 6SN7s, two VR150s, and two 6AX4s. The frequency response is rated at 18 Hz to 30 kHz with a tight tolerance of plus or minus a half decibel. It offers 13 decibels of gain and an output impedance of 293 ohms, making it compatible with a wide range of power amplifiers. Input options include two pair of XLR and two pairs of RCA. For outputs, you can choose either between one pair of XLR or one pair of single-ended RCA jacks, and there's also a 6.3 headphone jack conveniently located on the front panel. Power consumption is 45 watts. The preamp includes a 45-day in-home trial with a full refund minus shipping and is backed by a 5-year warranty excluding the tubes. Now, I'm not sure if you caught it, but my only bone to pick so far is the lack of outputs. I always run subwoofers in my system and often review a lot of single-ended gear. The idea of using a Y cable on the back end of a Raven just makes me feel a little bit sick to my stomach and a bit grumpy. Maybe a little bit too much ice cream for this cowboy. And depending on your setup, you might wish the Raven had more outputs as well. As for the Blackbirds, the zero feedback fully balanced tube amplifiers deliver 24 watts of output power and feature a carefully selected tube complement, a single 6SN7 for input, a pair, wait for it, of KT88s for the driver stage, and two 300Bs for the output. Voltage regulation is handled by a pair of VR105 tubes. The frequency response is rated at 18 Hz to 30 kHz plus or minus a half decibel at 2 watts and 26 Hz to 30 kHz plus or minus a half decibel at the full 24 watt rating. Connectivity includes both XLR and RCA inputs along with a 3.5mm 12 volt trigger input for integration with other gear. The amplifier measures 18 inches wide, 16 inches deep, and about 10 inches high, and weighs in at 53 pounds each. A 45-day in-home trial is included with a full refund minus shipping if returned. The amplifier is backed by a 5-year warranty excluding tubes. Finish options include Sapel and cherry wood, and buyers can choose between tube options like the Linlai 300B, E6SN7 KT88 set, or the Ray Tubes Reserve set featuring premium 300Bs, 6SN7, and KT88 tubes. And this is where things get interesting. Both the Raven preamplifier and Blackbird monoblocks from Spatial Audio are engineered with fully transformer coupled, balanced, and zero feedback topologies. The Raven employs input transformers to provide galvanic isolation, effectively eliminating ground loops and ensuring that each input floats independently from the circuitry. For the output stage, a custom designed step-down transformer reduces voltage while increasing current, resulting in a low output impedance, and this allows the Raven to drive a wide range of loads, including long cable runs and even 600 ohm professional gear without any issues in the signal. The Blackbird monoblocks are equally refined, utilizing interstage transformers between the driver and output stages for direct signal transfer from the plate to grid, with no capacitors or phase splitters in the path. This approach preserves signal purity and supports the amp's fully balanced zero feedback design. Together, the Raven and Blackbird create a seamless transformer-coupled system with a clear focus on sonic integrity and system synergy. All right, so let's just stop for a second. Now, I'm just going to let you know out of the gate, this is top-tier stuff. This rig is unbelievable. The setup sounds absolutely fantastic. There is no doubt about that. But you guys know me. It's like I can't help myself. I'm always first in line to crash whatever hyperbolic party that I just decided to throw. And there is one thing that I have to mention about this gear. I am more than happy with the sonic performance when music is playing. I do have to report, however, that when the amps are powered on with no music or between tracks, I can clearly hear a hum coming from the output transformers in all of this gear. Now, let's be careful here. The sound shed is acoustically treated and isolated from the home. There's no noise in here. It is incredibly quiet in here, and picking up the faintest noise is pretty easy. I've also identified some AC leakage or DC offset issues in the sound shed, and chances are that's probably contributing to this hum that I'm hearing, which is not Spatial Audio's problem to solve. Either way, I think it's fair to say that no amplifier is perfect in every way, and transformer hum might be one downside to this particular design. Of course, when DC offset creeps into the line, it can make that hum a lot louder than it should be, or louder than it might be in your setup at home, depending, of course, on your power situation. All right, into the weeds we go. Consider this your official trigger warning. It's been a while, but we're going to talk about cables on my channel.
What did you say?
And yes, that includes power cords. Oh, this is getting... I'm feeling so nervous right now. All right, first things first. Hear me out. I am the kind of reviewer who's open to trying just about anything. So when the team at Spatial Audio asked if I would be willing to test their prototype balanced cables in this system, it was an easy yes. At that time, we just wrapped up with Southwest Audio Fest, and I was hearing this setup, including all of these cables, for the very first time. And I'm going to tell you right now, it sounded incredible. That is to say, I had zero complaints. The system sounded great, and I appreciated every aspect of what I was hearing. These cables are made in-house, and silver plays a part in their design. Now, to be honest, I've never been the biggest fan of silver in anything. In my experience, it tends to push certain things forward in the stage and can come across as a little bright. That said, during that first listen, I didn't notice anything like that. In fact, I complimented the Spatial crew for crafting a silver cable that didn't really sound like a silver cable, at least right away. Of course, as you guys know, first impressions can be a bit tricky. Looking back, I kind of wish that I just kept those early comments to myself, because as the weeks went by and I had more time to compare, I started noticing some of the usual traits that I personally don't love about silver creeping in. There were moments, especially with vocals and upper mid-range content, where things seemed to poke out just a bit more than what I would like. And here's the kicker. When I swapped all of these cables out for single-ended copper cables, the stage opened up, and that forward character sounded more relaxed to my ears. Either way, folks, I'm not sure if Spatial Audio is going to move forward with this particular cable design, but if they do, and I think they certainly should, I'd also encourage them to consider offering both silver and copper options. And while they're at it, don't forget about those who enjoy single-ended cables. If my comments concern you about silver sound, well, I'm sure Spatial Audio will most likely offer some kind of reasonable return policy, and who knows, you might fall in love with these cables despite my nitpicking, because let's be honest, I'm not great at a lot of things, but nitpicking is definitely one of them. Now, as for power cords, yeah, this one's a bit of a head scratcher. I'm not about to die on this hill, so let's move through this as quickly as possible. When I swapped out the anti-cable power cords that I had on the monoblocks for some stranded copper cords from GR Research, I did notice a bit more heft and weight in the lower end. It was subtle, nothing earth-shattering here, and I'd probably look like a fool in a blind shootout, but that's how I heard it, and that is exactly how I'm going to report it. Either way, enough about cables. Feel free to take this with a grain of salt and for whatever it is worth. Okay, back to way more interesting stuff than cables. Let's talk about the mighty 300Bs. Before listening to the system, I recorded a long conversation with Lynn Olson and Don Sachs. I initially planned on releasing that video, but unfortunately there was so much distortion on my mic that the footage is totally unusable. Lynn, Don, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. It's a mess, and I would love to, maybe do this down the road. There might be a time and a place where maybe we can attempt that conversation again, but until then, I just wanted to share some of the things that Lynn mentioned about 300B tubes that I found very interesting and tie it together with what I ended up hearing and experiencing with this particular setup. As you guys know, I am no stranger to 300B tubes and certainly no stranger to tube amplifiers, but there was something about the sound of this system that felt quite different from other tube designs that I've dated in the past. While some tube amplifiers, especially older designs that haven't been updated, can sound a little slow and syrupy, others, even some OTL amps that I've tried, don't sound that way at all. They actually drift toward being, super clean and at times perhaps a little bit sterile sounding. I gotta say, I've been perplexed by this contrast in design philosophies for some time. Depending on the amp, I can appreciate both sonic signatures, but when it comes to a lot of those ultra clean tube amplifiers, I often scratch my head and I think to myself, why did you make a tube amp that sounds a little bit like a solid state amplifier without, a lot of the bass impact, authority, and precision of a great sounding solid state amplifier? With the Raven and Blackbird, this system ends this conversation and ties together both attributes in a tidy audiophile bow, handing it back to you with dynamics that will have you triple checking the 24-watt rating on the monoblocks. Will they drive Maggies or massive Wilsons? I doubt it. But anything that I've had laying around in the mid to upper 80s, sensitivity between 4 to 6 ohms has been no problem whatsoever. If anything, these amps aren't even starting to sweat with any speaker that I have thrown at them. Back to my point, when Lynn talked about 300B amplifiers, he described them as having very little distortion but being very difficult to drive. You really have to wake them up to hear their full potential. That is 300Bs. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of this. In the Blackbirds, every power section has its own power supply, and those massive 300B tubes are indeed being driven by KT88s. Now, I don't know about you, but that approach feels fresh. And being in the driver's seat for this review, I'll confirm it sounds fresh. I've heard 300Bs that sound syrupy and they sound slow. And after talking with Lynn, I think I get it. All those 300Bs needed was a bit more coffee. And with the Blackbird, that's exactly why we see KT88s as driver tubes. And of course, another unique thing about the Blackbirds is, again, these amps are transformer coupled. That is to say, there are no caps or op amps at all in the signal path. Lynn mentioned that no matter how fancy your capacitors are or how great the capacitors sound, they all have a sound. And on this, I agree. I've been saying the same thing about speaker components to the point where y'all probably have listening fatigue. Either way, no caps, no coloration. And here is where I think Spatial Audio nailed the landing of this audiophile jumbo jet that makes these amplifiers quite unique. Bottom line here, folks, some companies will try to convince you that transformers are evil and they get in the way of how tubes are supposed to sound. And you know what? That is a fantastic theory and phenomenal marketing slogan, but the Spatial Audio Blackbirds have me convinced there is more to the story. In other words, these amps are loaded to the teeth with transformers, and yet all I hear is the perfect blend of euphonic tube soundstage with the precision of great solid-state sound. All right, enough with the blabbering. Here is what I want to do to finish out the rest of the listening impressions. I took the time to carefully record 3 different configurations and systems with these amps to compare. The first clip will be a solid-state rig that I've thrown together as a starting point. This system consists of my Inuos Zenith, Maydac, Holo Audio Serene, and Legacy Audio IV2 power amp. All cables in the system are single-ended RCA cables from GR, and power cords are also from GR Research. The speakers used in the recording are my prototype speakers that I've been working on, and I even managed to bring the subwoofers to the party, this time to help with the bottom octave. The second system that you're going to be hearing is the same as above, except you'll be hearing the Holo Audio Serene, which is also a solid-state preamp, playing through the Blackbird tube amplifiers. This will give us our first change in the system, allowing you to catch the differences between the power amplifiers in the system. The last system will complete the comparisons by changing out the Serene preamp for the Raven tube preamplifier, with everything else being the same. I have cut short clips together to help make these comparisons, and I do recommend wearing headphones when listening. Now, a side note. As much as I enjoy recording these samples, and I have learned how to do them quite well, let's remember there is only so much these clips can tell us, and that is why my commentary about what I'm hearing in the room is important to take into consideration. All the clips are recorded using my trusty Earthworks QTC40s and Zoom F8N. Again, I do recommend tossing on some headphones for the best chance to catch subtle differences, and with that, let's check out the first 2 recorded clips and go from there. Headphones on, let's go.
Engineer, where are you headed? Engineer, where are you headed? Engineer, where are you headed?
right, so this first sound clip consisting of the 3 different rigs does showcase a couple of things worth mentioning. In the room, and perhaps more than the recording can translate, the first rig, which is solid state, offers the darkest background in the music and is essentially dead quiet. Audiophiles talk a lot about pitch black backgrounds in their systems, and if this is a big priority, I think this setup would certainly do the trick. Also, this solid state system sounds effortless, and you know what? It should. That legacy amp dishes out an astonishing 1,000 watts into 4 ohms, which, doing some quick math, I doubt my outlets could even supply that kind of horsepower. In any event, there is nothing that I throw at this configuration that ever sounds strained or held back. Now, for critical listeners, and I know that you're out there, if you noticed that the first solid state rig sounded one shade darker when compared to the second rig or the third rig, not only did I hear that as well, but it's even more obvious in the room. So, by changing the solid state amp for the Blackbirds or going all tube with both the Raven and Blackbirds, those rigs to me add a little bit more spark and life to the party. Now, this will be difficult to catch in the clips, but there is also a little more soul in his voice in the second and third rig as well. The first system, being all solid state, sounds matter of fact. This is what you get, and by rights, it's probably telling us the truth and nothing but the truth. And there's nothing wrong with that, but as soon as we drop in the Blackbirds or we go full tube glory, with that spark that I already mentioned and a touch of that harmonic flair that tubes are known for, we got soul. There's something in his voice that just to me sounds a little bit more engaging. Now with the third rig, which is all tube, things start to get really interesting. To my ears, the Serene preamp is holding on to as much of that clean resolution as possible, which to me gives that second rig a lot of interesting balance of precision combined with tube magic. As we go full tube with the Raven and Blackbirds, one might think we've sacrificed that resolution for, I don't know, something else. But that's not how I hear it. To me, we actually retain the resolution we heard in rig number 2 with the Serene, but managed to sprinkle a dash of top-tier texture into the music all at the same time. Now let me unpack that so it makes a little bit more sense. There are times when listening to the solid state rig, and to a lesser degree, the second rig with the Serene, that some vocals and instruments can sound precise, no doubt about that, but might trade that precision for a little bit of texture in the music. In the second sound clip that we just heard, you can actually hear this in the sound of those strings. If you listen for the pluck of the string in the pizzicato passage, you get more of the attack air and texture of the string itself. Also, listen carefully to the bows rubbing against the strings, and listen for the sound of the strings vibrating against the bow. That, my friends, is the texture that I'm talking about. And you know what? In the room, it's much easier to catch. But to me, there is something about the magic of tubes that I just get. I love it and I understand it. And with the resolution being offered up by the Raven and Blackbirds, the texture that I hear with this rig is truly one of the best presentations that I have ever spent time with in a decade of reviewing hi-fi gear. Here is the bottom line. This system has magic and it has soul. It might not be the most resolving, hyper-detailed, or squeaky clean setup that you can assemble. But if the sound of a stick smacking a tom, the bloom of resonance that follows, the surge of energy, and the decay of the room pulsing with each hit is the kind of dragon that you like to ride, well, buckle up, Sally. Spatial Audio has a few dragons in stock. All right, headphones back on. Let's run through another track focusing on the human voice and see what these rigs can do in that particular category.
No hubiera pensado que yo me iba a enamorar, jamás no quería saber nada más, nunca más. No hubiera pensado que yo me iba a enamorar, jamás no quería saber nada más, nunca más. No hubiera pensado que yo me iba a enamorar, jamás no quería saber nada más, nunca más.
Okay, rig 1 comes out swinging on this track. And getting this out of the way right now, I don't give a rat's rear end that the Legacy IV2 is indeed a Class D amplifier. I don't care at all. To me, this amplifier sounds incredible when rendering the human voice. Also, this system excels at cleanliness. It trims all of the fat off of the ribeye of music, which, if we're really talking about steak, trimming anything off a ribeye would be a quick walk into the country here in Texas, but you know what I mean. It sounds clean. It sounds precise. In fact, as I listen to this rig, I can't find one thing to complain about. Everything is in its right place. There is no coloration that sounds pretty for the sake of sounding pretty, and that's that. Now, system number 2, to me, doesn't sound quite as different from the first go-around, but sure enough, that same spark we caught on to does indeed happen again with female vocals. If you listen carefully to the top pitch of her voice, it sounds a little bit more awake and lively. At the same time, or better yet, at the other end of her pitch down low, there seems to be a little more body. As we listen to rig number 3, that body we heard shows up in full glory, and let's get this part right. While there is some real magic going on in the heart of mid-range with the all-tube system, to me, it never sounds syrupy, slow, or so colored that it's not even close to what the reference track is supposed to sound like. No. To me, when the Raven and Blackbirds take flight, you are hearing the best that Tube Magic has to offer in that no resolution is sacrificed, and the only thing that is added to the music is soul. Okay, so far we have 3 killer rigs that, depending on what you want out of a system, any of these would be a great choice. But let's get real. When it comes to dynamics, bass authority, or razor-sharp precision, this solid-state rig that we're hearing is going to backhand this tube gear and show it who the boss is. Right? Right? Yeah. You might want to slow your roll there, Captain America, because as I said in the opening of this video, Lynn Olson and Don Sachs are not interested in making slow or boring sounding amplifiers. And as you are about to hear, that is not what they designed in the Raven or the Blackbirds. Okay, in these last tracks, the solid state rig shows up to the party and clearly demonstrates that when it comes to backflips off the roof into the pool without breaking one bone, well, that's what solid state does. And who can complain? With the Serene and Legacy in the driver's seat, we have precision, we have command, and we have the authority in the music. Everything is again in its right place and played with perfect clarity. Now, what's interesting to me, as we drop the Legacy and throw in the Blackbirds in the second clip, we don't sacrifice an ounce of resolution, and even better, we don't slow anything down. Of course, in a death metal race, that might be a different story, but to be honest with you, I recently had a visitor come to the shed, and we played the deathest of death metal tracks on this very rig, and neither of us felt like these tube amplifiers were struggling with anything that we played. With the last rig all tube glory and without sounding like a broken record, no backsteps in tone, resolution, or speed. That's right, folks. With a callback on my opening lines in this video, if solid state is vanilla and tubes are chocolate, it seems to me that the Raven and Blackbirds might be vanilla and chocolate swirl, giving us audiophiles all the speed, agility, grip, and authority that great solid state has to offer, along with the vibrancy, euphonic texture, and spatial information that the best tube amplifiers are known for. And this leads me to my final thoughts. You know, I have been around enough gear to know and realize that just because something is expensive, that doesn't mean the performance you get always matches the price tag. The Raven is just north of $6,000, and the Blackbirds will set you back another $18K for the pair. That is a lot of money, and there are many other tube amplifiers out there that also sound incredible that won't come close to that price point. However, I'll remember this beautiful rig for a very long time, as it does seem to me that this is one of the very few tube amplifier systems that I've heard that truly embraces strengths from both ends of the spectrum. I would imagine solid state lovers will love this gear, and the same goes for hardcore tube lovers as well. And with that, I'll see you spatial audio loving audiophiles in the next video.